Terra's Story, Chapter 32. Sleep and rest are different things, Terra discovered, again as she tossed and turned, moaned and panted, ran, flew, and jumped, anything to get away from the monsters chasing her in her nightmare. They were everywhere. The face of every beloved friend morphed into something strange and horrible, grotesque deformities around blazing, hate-filled eyes. They jumped out at her, snuck up behind her, flew at her and charged her with claws and talons, teeth, and fire breath. And then the dream shifted. She ran past a giant mirror, saw her panic and her hunched, contracted posture, felt an inexplicable pull toward the mirror and the blaze of light around it. When she stared straight into her reflection, she saw an image of herself bigger than life, standing with feet planted and hands on hips. She glimpsed a shield and sword with strange symbols on them that faded in and out like a mist each time she focused her attention on them. She saw a figure in the background, behind her, a tall man with long, dark hair and piercing eyes, his posture the same as that of her image, feet planted, fists on hips. He had a bow in his hand and a leather strap held a quiver of arrows tight against the back of his left shoulder. Light glinted off the sharp edge of the tomahawk stuck in the sash around his middle. Somehow Terra knew her back was protected, and she faced fully forward to the image of herself. Instinctively she stretched and stood tall, and found herself filling out the outline of her image in the mirror. She grew and snap. Suddenly she was the giant figure in the mirror, a fearless warrior, scanning her surroundings for her demon antagonists. As her eyes darted from one to another, each monster's face became more hideous, contorted with fear as it backed away from her and faded into the distant darkness. She lowered her sword but kept the shield in place, noticing as she slowly turned that it sent rays of light into the murk. She glanced to right and left and saw beside her her friends and father, her mentors, human and supernatural, and the shadow of the man behind her, whose energy wrapped around her like a loving embrace. Terra hovered on the edge of wakefulness, adrenaline still pumping, but a feeling of safety and protection soothed her and lulled her back to sleep. This time she dreamt of curling up in the hollow of a great tree and being guarded by a variety of forest critters. She smiled and relaxed into complete surrender, bathed in a glow of energy that crackled around her. She awoke, still smiling, seconds before her alarm went off, and stretched, feeling muscles and bones strong and ready. She felt movement beside her and glanced over to see Joni also stretching and sitting up. Then she remembered. Cap had taken Joni's section of the sofa while Brian slept in his usual place. She reached for her cell phone. Thank goodness it still had most of its charge from being plugged in at the station. Silenced the alarm, turned on the flashlight, and found the candle on her nightstand with the lighter next to it. She lit her candle, saw the flash as Joni lit the one on the other side, and they both jumped out of bed and scrambled into the dark clothes they'd laid out. In the living room, Cap and Brian were ready too, the tall pillar candle on the coffee table illuminating the room. "This way," Terra spoke sotto voce, clicked on her maglite, and blew out the big candle. The others followed her out the door and down the stairs. The night appeared quiet only at first. The clouds that had blanketed the city for so many days appeared thinner and higher, and they could see the light of faint twinkles from time to time. The air felt cooler and not as full of moisture ready to fall on their heads. A thin sliver of moon peeked through the clouds, a pendant around the throat of the night, enhancing its beauty but shedding no light. As soon as they entered the park, everything around them came to life. Each rustle of leaves and crack of twig spoke of a critter, or a breath of breeze, or... Terra recalled fragments of her dream, straightened her spine, and pulled her shoulders back. When they reached the edge of the lake, they all stopped but Terra, who under cover of darkness stripped off her clothes, walked right into the water, and began to glide toward the center of the lake. The others watched from the shore, Cap with his mouth hanging open and eyes wide, Joni and Brian less startled but equally curious. After only a minute or two they could barely see her, saw more the ripples of water fanning out behind her, catching faint glimmers of light as they moved and spread. And then they couldn't see anything. The surface of the lake appeared smooth and glassy in the darkness, while the sounds of the forest around them seemed to increase in number and volume. They sat oblivious to the dampness of the ground and grasses, every sense alert, especially the non-physical ones, and kept their eyes fixed on the lake. Now they saw a dark blob in the middle of the lake, and another like it, gliding effortlessly in a counterclockwise circle. They could hear the rhythmic shoosh as each small ripple of water generated by their passage kissed the nearest bank. An unearthly glow arose above them as the circle became a spiral, then became a whirlpool where the water spiraled down and the light spiraled up. "Pretty remarkable, isn't it?" came a soft voice from behind them. The voice held a magical quality that kept them from spooking, so when Simeona stepped forward, they smiled as if they had expected her all along. She noted their peace and smiled back at them, satisfied with the cohesion of the energy around them, and the bands of light she could see stretching out to and from the swimmers still circling in the center of the lake. Simeona sat in front of them, right in the middle of the flowing ribbons of light, crossed her legs and placed her hands in thumb-ring finger mudra on her knees. The ribbons of light grew strong enough for even novice magicians to see, and not all of the observers were novices. Joni and Brian felt the energies building inside them. Cap felt so many things he couldn't distinguish or identify that he simply let go, and immediately felt peace and calm wrap around him. Though Simeona sat peaceful and smiling on the bank between them and the water, they could feel that part of her had gone somewhere else. As they watched, her expression shifted and her body jerked and twitched. Her brow and the corners of her mouth lowered. She snarled and snorted. Her hands released the mudra and became like claws holding spheres that could have been crystal balls. She brought her two hands, and whatever they held together in front of her, merging it into something much larger, much brighter, if invisible light could be bright. She scrambled to her feet, awkward because she still held the glowing sphere in front of her, a sphere now larger than her head. Once she was fully erect, Simeona raised the sphere even with her head and released it, blowing it with all the power of her lungs toward the center of the lake and the whirlpool of descending water and ascending light. It floated steadily, following the ribbons of light still connecting the swimmers to those on the bank, until it reached the whirlpool, where it burst into a bolt of lightning that reached from the depths of the waters below into the impenetrable dark above. The watchers felt an energetic jolt that reverberated through their bodies as everything around them vibrated from the impact. And then an unearthly quiet fell upon them, not fearful in and of itself, merely signifying by contrast some kind of completion. When they looked at the lake again, they could see only one dark blob that, as it glided toward them, turned from something otherworldly into their friend Terra, who slowly climbed out of the water, careless of the water streaming from her hair, and reclaimed her clothes. She didn't approach them yet, simply turned and sat on the edge of the bank, her feet still in the water, her posture relaxed, her presence serene. They heard her murmuring as though to someone in the lake, but could not understand what she said. It didn't seem to matter. They watched the shadow of Simeona walk over and put her arms around Terra, leaning a cheek against the top of her head. A halo of light grew bright around them. When finally Terra rose and she and Simeona walked toward them, they felt as though they snapped out of a spell. Simeona spoke. "Well, we done good work tonight, but you're not going to like what I got to tell ya."